Hey class, today we're going to learn about rational numbers. So by the end of the lesson, you will be able to identify terminating and repeating decimals, convert fractions and mixed numbers into decimals, and convert decimals to fractions and mixed numbers. So first, all of these types of decimals, fractions, and mixed numbers that we're going to look at today are rational numbers. So what are rational numbers? A rational number is any number that can be written as a ratio as A over B, where B is not equal to 0. That's simply because we can't divide by 0. It's undefined. So that's why the denominator, or B, cannot be 0. Rational numbers can be in the form as fractions or mixed numbers, terminating decimals, meaning the decimal has an end, or repeating decimals, which means part of the digits repeat. It's also important to note that whole numbers can be written as fractions because the number 3 can be written as 3 over 1. So another form that rational numbers can take are whole numbers. And it's also important to note that rational numbers can be positive or negative. So if you want to make note somewhere, can be positive or negative. So let's come up with some examples. So like I said, an example could be 3. It could be -5, right? Those can both be written as a fraction. They can be written as a terminating decimal, 3.0 or -5.0. So those are rational numbers. Other rational numbers could be 0.5 and then 4 repeating, right? Repeating decimals are considered rational numbers. Things like -3/4, because fractions, you can have mixed numbers, 3 and 1/4. Those are all considered rational numbers. The only numbers that aren't considered rational numbers are decimals that don't have repeating patterns. So something like pi, right? Pi, the decimal of it, goes on forever, so it's not terminating. And it's a random digit, so it's not a pattern, so we can't be a repeating decimal. Other things will be like radicals, so square root and cube root type things, but we'll get to that later in the year. All right, so rational numbers are anything that can be written in the form as a fraction, and they can be positive or negative. So a type of rational number, one of the forms, is a terminating or repeating decimal. So let's take a look at what that is. So any fraction can be written as a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator, right? So our top number divided by our bottom number. All right, so a rational number is a fraction. So 1 over 40, that is a rational number. But we want to see if 1/40th, the fraction, converts to a terminating or repeating decimal. So we're going to do 1 divided by 40 to get our decimal. And we can do our long division, 1 divided by 40. 40 goes into 1 0 times. We're going to have to add our decimal point and annex 0. 40 goes into 10 0 times, so we're going to have to add another 0. 40 goes into 100 twice, and 40 times 2 is 80. So we're going to write that down. Subtract 100 minus 80 is 20. Bring down the 0, and 40 goes into 200 5 times. And 200 minus 200 is 0. So we've got a remainder. We reached a remainder of 0. So that means this is a terminating decimal. So 1/40th as a decimal is 0.025 or 25 thousandths. And this is called a terminating decimal. So this is a type of rational number, a terminating decimal, and it's a decimal that ends or whose repeating digit is 0, is called a terminating decimal. All right, so let's now look at another fraction, which is a rational number, 11/18. So we're going to do 11 divided by 18 to get our decimal. So I can do 11 divided by 18. 18 goes into 11 0 times, so I'm going to have to put my decimal and keep going and add a 0. 18 goes into 110 6 times. 18 times 6 is 108. Subtract, we get 2, and then we're going to have to bring down the 0. 18 goes into 20 once. 1 times 18 is 18. We subtract, we get 2 again, bring down the 0, 20. 18 goes into 20 once. 1 times 18 is 18. And this is going to continuously happen. So this is what we call a repeating decimal, because the digit 1 is going to repeat, right? We didn't get to end our division. There is no remainder of 0. It's going to keep going forever. So a decimal that repeats a digit or a set of digits is called a repeating decimal. And repeating decimals count as rational numbers because, like you can see, it can be written in the form of a ratio or fraction, because that repeating decimal was 11/18 as a ratio. Repeating decimals can be written using bar notation, and that is when you put a bar over the repeating digit or the set of digits. So in this one, we would rewrite 0.61111 as 0.61 with a bar over the digit that repeats. In this case, it's the 1. All right, so now that we know what terminating and repeating decimals are, we're going to quick try and sort a set of them. So here's our set. We have 1.22222. That is a repeating decimal, so I'm going to write that over here in my repeating decimals, and I'm going to use my bar notation to rewrite it. So that was this one. Now our next one is 0.3455. That finishes, that ends, so that is a terminating decimal. So I'm going to write that over here in my terminating decimals. The next one is 5.40000, and the 0 continues. Well, the digit that is repeating is a 0, so that's actually considered a terminating decimal because we can really just write it as 5.4, right? It had a remainder of 0. And our last one is negative 2.6454545 and so on. So that is a repeating decimal. So I'm going to put negative 2, and then my 0.6, and then the 4.5 is the part that's repeating. So I'm going to put my bar over the 4.5 only, not the 6. All right, now I want you to try number 1 and 2 on your own. So you're going to take the fraction, that rational number, and divide the numerator by the denominator to convert it into a decimal, and then tell me if each one is a terminating or repeating decimal. In number 2, we have a mixed number, so you're just going to put the negative 2 there because you know that's going to stay the same, and then you'll do your 7 divided by 9 and add that on after you get that. All right, pause the video, try, and then when you're ready to check your answers, you'll hit continue. All right, take a moment, check your answers with my answers. Number 1 was a terminating decimal, and number 2 was a repeating decimal. All right, now we're going to look at how to convert fractions and mixed numbers to decimals using something besides division. So if our fraction has a denominator that can go into one of the decimal place values, like 10, 100, thousands, then we can simply create an equivalent fraction to have our decimal place value to rewrite it. So let's take a look. We have 3 and 7/10. Well, if we look at our decimal place value, we have tenths, hundredths, and then thousands. So if we said 7/10, that's just going to be 0.7. So we can rewrite this as 3.7 or 7/10. So we used our decimal place value to just rewrite it as a decimal, and now that's a terminating decimal. Number 2, we have negative 1/20. Well, how can we make the denominator 20 into a decimal friendly number? Well, 20 can go into 100, and hundredths is one of our decimal place values. So 20 goes into 100 5 times. So we multiply that by 5, and whenever we do the denominator, we have to do the numerator to keep it an equivalent or equal fraction. So 1 times 5 is 5. So now we have negative 500. So that's negative 500. 5 is in the hundredths place value, which is right there. So this would convert to negative 0.05. Right? We're just placing it in our decimal place value. All right, I want you to try these next two on your own. All right, check your answers with my answers. Now you could have divided the numerator by the denominator, or if you notice that you can make those decimal friendly numbers and just use the decimal place value, then you can do that. All right, last thing we're going to look at is how to convert decimals to fractions or mixed numbers. So every terminating decimal can be written as a fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, 1000, or a greater power of 10. The place value of the last digit will be your denominator. So let me show you what I'm talking about. In number 1, we have the decimal negative 0.15, which is a rational number. And the 5 is in the hundredths place value. So since that's the last digit and it's in the hundredths place value, we're going to put 15 over 100. And it was negative. So this is negative 15 hundredths. And now all we have to do is simplify. So we can divide by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So now we have negative 3/20. All right, all I took was the place value of that last digit, made that my denominator, and simplified. And since it was a negative, we keep it a negative. Number 2, we have 5.06. 6, again, is in the hundredths place value. My whole number is 5, so I'm going to keep that as 5. And then I have 6 hundredths, so I'm going to put 6 over 100. And then I'm going to simplify as much as I can. So if I divide by 2, I get 3 over 50. So 5 and 3/50 is 5.06 as a mixed number. All right, I want you to try 1 and 2 and then click continue when you're ready to check your answers. All right, check your answers with my answers. And that's all for today, so have a good day.